Niagara has long drawn the bold, the curious, the broken. But beneath its beauty lies a darker current, one of sorrow, loss, and final moments. Some fell by accident, others by choice, and a few in defiant pursuit of glory. These are the most haunting deaths at the falls, each one a step too close to the edge. It was a bright July morning in 1930 when George Stathakis prepared to chase his dream. George, a 46-year-old Greek immigrant living in Buffalo, New York, wasn't like most people. He had big ideas about life and the afterlife, and believed he could share them with the world. To gain the attention he needed, George planned something extraordinary. He would survive a trip over Niagara Falls in a specially designed barrel. Months of preparation went into his plan. George designed a massive barrel made of oak, reinforced with steel, and weighing nearly 2,000 pounds. The barrel, 10 feet long and 5 feet wide, was built to withstand the fall's immense power. Inside, he included oxygen tanks and supplies to help him survive. Confident in his design, George believed this daring stunt would make him famous and give him the platform he needed to share his ideas. George wasn't alone in this journey. With him was Sunny Boy, his pet turtle, said to be over 150 years old. Taking Sunny Boy along showed George's belief in his plan and added a personal touch to the risky endeavor. As the lid was sealed tightly, the muffled roar of the falls filled the barrel, accompanied by the creaking of wood under pressure. The barrel was released into the river, drifting closer to the edge. Onlookers watched as it disappeared over the falls, swallowed by mist and crashing water. Remarkably, the barrel survived the 167-foot drop and emerged intact at the base of the falls. For a moment, it seemed George's plan had worked, but trouble quickly followed. Red Hill Sr., a local daredevil and expert on the falls, had warned George about the risks of his barrel's size and weight. At over 2,000 pounds, it was far heavier than those used in other successful attempts. Hill cautioned that the barrel could get trapped in the unpredictable currents near the base of the falls. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Instead of floating downstream, the barrel became caught in the powerful currents behind the falls. It spun and rocked violently, unreachable by rescuers. Inside, George faced a grim reality. The dark, cramped space was suffocating, and the deafening roar of the falls drowned out everything else. His oxygen supply, designed to last about 8 hours, was running out. Rescue efforts were relentless, but the raging water made reaching the barrel nearly impossible. After more than 22 hours, they finally managed to pull it free. When they opened the barrel, the outcome was devastating. George had suffocated long before help arrived, trapped by the very design meant to protect him. In a cruel twist of fate, George's creation had become his prison. The heavy, reinforced barrel built to ensure his survival had instead sealed his tragic fate. Yet, amidst the heartbreak, there was a glimmer of hope. Sunny Boy, George's turtle, survived the ordeal unharmed. The little turtle became a symbol of resilience and was later featured in children's books and news stories. Sunny Boy's fame brought a small, bittersweet echo of the recognition George had sought. Today, George's barrel is displayed at Niagara Falls, a solemn reminder of the risks of challenging nature and the cost of daring dreams. His story endures, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to human ambition and the unexpected ways it can unfold. It was a warm August 5th, 1951, when William Red Hill Jr. stood on the edge of the Niagara River, staring at the churning waters below. The air was thick with tension as the crowd gathered along the riverbanks, unaware that the spectacle they had come to witness would be more than just a daring stunt. It would mark the end of one man's life and the beginning of a shift in the culture of Niagara Falls daredevilry. Red Hill Jr., son of the renowned riverman William Red Hill Sr., had grown up in his father's shadow. William Sr., a local legend, had once warned George about the dangers of the river's unpredictable currents. Red Jr., a riverman himself, had long tried to match his father's fame. He had assisted on many rescue missions, swum the treacherous currents, and even attempted a few stunts, but nothing had brought him the recognition he craved. By the early 1950s, life had taken a hard turn for Red. Financial troubles from poor investments and a lack of steady work piled up. The pressure of carrying on his family's name weighed heavily on him. The once strong Hill legacy seemed to be fading, and Red found himself desperate to revive it. He needed something bold, a stunt that would restore his reputation and bring the attention he had long sought. Red's plan was simple but incredibly dangerous. He would ride over the falls in a new contraption he had built himself, an absurdly thrown-together device he called the Thing. Unlike the carefully designed barrels used by others, Red's vessel was a crude collection of oversized inner tubes, canvas straps, and fishing nets, lashed together with little thought for its safety. Sandbags were tossed in for weight, but the structure offered no real protection. The whole thing resembled a floating scrap heap more than a life-saving vessel. The contraption had no rigid structure to keep it intact, and its mismatched materials looked like they might fall apart before it even reached the falls. Despite the warnings from friends and experts who told him the odds of survival were nearly impossible, Red was determined. He climbed into the Thing that fateful day, the crowd watching with a mix of disbelief and excitement. As the contraption made its way toward the edge, the water seemed to twist around it, pushing it dangerously close to the falls. The crowd held their breath as the Thing tipped over and plunged into the mist, vanishing from sight. The deafening roar of the falls drowned out all sound as the contraption disappeared. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then pieces of the Thing began to surface, shredded inner tubes, broken canvas, and tangled fishing nets drifting aimlessly downstream. The structure had failed. The audience fell silent, realizing that Red Jr. had not survived. His body was found the next day near the Maid of the Mist, battered and broken beyond recognition. It was clear that the immense power of the falls, combined with the ill-conceived nature of his vessel, had left little chance for survival. The remains of the stunt were a tragic reminder of the consequences of his desperation. Red Jr.'s death sent shockwaves through the community. What had been meant as a bold act of redemption ended in tragedy. The incident led to stricter regulations on stunts at Niagara Falls. Authorities tightened safety measures, making permits harder to obtain, and penalties harsher for unauthorized attempts. The perception of daredevilry at the falls shifted, a reminder of the fine line between bravery and recklessness. Though Red Jr.'s name might have been lost to the currents, his tragic end brought about a shift in the culture of stunts. His death, while a disaster, had made the falls a little safer for those who came after him. The river continued to claim its victims, but now there were stricter measures in place to prevent future reckless acts. Red Jr.'s ill-fated attempt had, ironically, made a difference. It was July 9th, 1960, near Niagara Falls. The summer sun shone brightly as 40-year-old James Honeycutt prepared for what should have been a pleasant boat ride on the upper Niagara River. A contractor from Raleigh, North Carolina, working on the Niagara Parks Commission hydro project, Jim had invited 7-year-old Roger Woodward and his 17-year-old sister Deanne for an afternoon excursion in his 14-foot aluminum boat powered by a modest 7.5 horsepower Evinrude outboard motor. The Woodward children's parents trusted Jim completely. Before setting out, he made sure both children wore life jackets, a decision that would later prove crucial. The trio launched from Lynch Trailer Camp along the American shoreline, about 5 miles upstream from the falls. The outing began peacefully, with Jim showing the children the scenic beauty of the river. Approximately 1 mile upstream from the thundering Horseshoe Falls, disaster struck. Jim attempted to turn the boat around when suddenly the motor sputtered and died. Examining the engine, he discovered the propeller pin had sheared off. A catastrophic mechanical failure at the worst possible moment. The boat was now powerless against the river's relentless current. Acting quickly, Jim grabbed the oars and began rowing frantically toward shore. But the Niagara River, which carries 750,000 gallons of water per second toward the falls, proved too powerful. As the boat drifted closer to danger, Jim remained focused on the children's safety, ensuring their life jackets were secure. In the chaos, he had no time to put on his own. Near the falls, the water became increasingly turbulent. Massive waves tossed the small craft violently, until it struck a rock and capsized, throwing all 3 passengers into the churning rapids. The force of the water separated Deanne from Jim and Roger. She managed to cling to the overturned boat momentarily before being pulled under by a powerful wave. When Deanne surfaced, she found herself being swept toward Terrapin Point on Goat Island. There, John Hayes, a 44-year-old truck driver from Vauxhall, New Jersey, spotted her struggling in the water. In a heroic act, Hayes climbed over the guardrail, anchored himself with one leg through the bars, and reached out to Deanne. With the help of another tourist, John Quattrochi, they pulled her to safety just 20 feet from the brink. Meanwhile, Jim held onto young Roger as they were swept toward the falls. Witnesses described seeing Jim clutching the boy tightly, trying to protect him even as they approached the edge. Then, in a final act of selflessness, Jim pushed Roger away from himself, perhaps hoping the boy's lighter weight and life jacket might give him a better chance of survival. At 12:55 p.m., both went over the 167-foot drop of Horseshoe Falls. In what many call the miracle of Niagara, Roger Woodward survived the plunge, his small size, weighing only 55 pounds, and the orange life jacket helped him avoid the jagged rocks at the base. The crew of the Maid of the Mist 2 spotted him bobbing in the water, and after 3 attempts, pulled him aboard using a life ring. Roger suffered only minor cuts and bruises. Jim Honeycutt wasn't as fortunate. Without a life jacket and battered by the tremendous force of the falls, he disappeared beneath the churning waters. Despite extensive search efforts, his body wasn't recovered until 3 days later, found about a quarter-mile downstream. The tragedy and miracle of that day became legendary in Niagara's history. Roger Woodward became the first person known to survive an unprotected plunge over the falls, while Jim Honeycutt's final act of ensuring the children's safety likely saved their lives at the cost of his own. Today, a small plaque near Terrapin Point commemorates this extraordinary event, a testament to both nature's awesome power and one man's ultimate sacrifice. It was a brisk spring day in April 2017, and the roaring sound of Niagara Falls echoed through the air. The river churned below as it always did, carrying with it the promise of a fatal drop for those who dared to challenge the power of the falls. On this day, however, the falls would claim a man who had once walked away from them unharmed, a man who thought he could conquer their force once again. Kirk Jones, a 53-year-old from Michigan, had already made history in 2003 when he became the first person to survive a plunge over Niagara Falls without any protective gear. At 167 feet, the drop had nearly cost him his life, yet he emerged from the roiling water with nothing more than minor injuries. It was considered a miracle. Kirk had been struggling with personal issues at the time, and some believed his decision to jump was a desperate act, one fueled by a need to escape. For a short while, he was thrust into the media spotlight, hailed as a survivor of the impossible. But the attention faded, and with it came legal repercussions. He was fined and banned from Canada for life. Despite the fame and the consequences, Kirk seemed drawn back to the falls, as if there was unfinished business between them. Banned from the Canadian side of the falls, he focused his attention on the American side, where he planned his return. Over the years, he spoke of his connection to the falls, as though they had become a part of him. In the months leading up to April 2017, he began to talk openly about his plans to return, this time not just for survival, but for a new purpose. He envisioned this second stunt as a way to launch a career in entertainment, to prove to the world that he could survive the impossible once again. Kirk's plan was unconventional at best. He purchased a large plastic ball online, the type used in zorbing, where people roll downhill inside a ball. Kirk believed that the ball would protect him during the plunge, cushioning the impact of the water and allowing him to survive. He thought that the rolling motion, which worked on hills, might somehow make the drop survivable, even though the falls were nothing like a hill. With his pet boa constrictor, Misty, by his side, he launched the ball into the fast-moving river above the falls, hoping this bizarre idea would launch his career. Witnesses reported seeing the ball drifting toward the edge of the falls. The current, as usual, was swift, and the rapids caused the ball to spin wildly. The water roared as the ball neared the precipice. After that, it vanished. It's unclear whether Kirk had ejected from the ball before it went over the falls, but when the ball was later retrieved, it was found empty. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, hoping that, just like before, Kirk might somehow survive. But this time, the falls showed no mercy. The U.S. Coast Guard recovered Kirk's body on June 2nd, 2017, about 12 miles downstream from the falls. His pet snake, Misty, was never found. Kirk Jones, the man who had once survived the impossible, had been claimed by the very force he had dared to challenge once more. His story serves as a grim reminder of the power of nature and the limits of human will. The initial survival had been deemed a miracle, a rare stroke of luck, but the second attempt proved fatal. Why would a man who had already defied the odds attempt such a dangerous feat again? What drove Kirk to tempt fate, knowing the lethal power of Niagara Falls? Perhaps it was the allure of proving that lightning could strike twice, or a desire to relive the fleeting moment of survival. Or maybe it was a deeper compulsion to face the impossible once more. Despite the odds stacked against him, Kirk's death serves as a stark warning to those who might think that they can outsmart nature. It's a reminder that some forces, like Niagara Falls, cannot be conquered, only respected. Before we continue with this heart-wrenching tale, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more real-life stories like this. It was a summer day in 1981 when 28-year-old Dunya Sayegh, her husband Rafik, and their 3 children visited Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. The family, who had immigrated from Lebanon and lived in Toronto for 8 years, planned a fun day at one of Canada's most famous landmarks. But what began as a day of joy would soon transform into a heartbreaking tragedy that would captivate and divide public opinion. Dunya carried her 2-month-old son Hesham in her arms as they approached the stone railing near Horseshoe Falls. The infant, who had a mild respiratory condition, was deeply cherished by his family. Friends would later testify that Dunya adored her long-awaited 3rd child and was rarely seen without him in her arms. Despite his health challenges, Hesham was the center of his mother's world. As Rafik stepped away to buy film for their camera, Dunya stood near the railing, approximately 12 feet from where the Niagara River roars over the falls. The barrier stood about 3 feet high, designed to keep visitors safe while allowing them to view the natural wonder. Hesham was cradled in his mother's arms, wrapped in a light blanket despite the summer heat. What happened next would be disputed in courtrooms and debated in living rooms across Canada. According to witnesses, Dunya suddenly staggered backward, appearing unsteady on her feet. She clutched her head with one hand, crying out that she felt dizzy. In that moment of disorientation, Hesham slipped from her grasp and fell over the edge of the railing. Tourists nearby screamed in horror as the tiny infant was carried by the powerful current. Within seconds, Hesham was swept over the 162-foot drop of Horseshoe Falls, where 750,000 gallons of water crashed down every second. The force of such a fall would be devastating for anyone, let alone a fragile 2-month-old. Dunya became frantic, repeatedly crying out for her baby. Overcome with grief, she attempted to approach the water's edge but was restrained by her family and bystanders. She was taken to Greater Niagara General Hospital, where doctors heavily sedated her due to her extreme emotional distress. In the days that followed, search efforts focused on recovering Hesham's body. Operators of tourist boats scanned the waters, but the powerful currents and jagged rocks made the search nearly impossible. Authorities warned the family that the infant's body might never be found, a prediction that would prove tragically accurate. Initially, police viewed the incident as a terrible accident. Dunya maintained she had experienced a dizzy spell, and witnesses supported her claim, describing her staggering movements and immediate distress. However, just days later, the case took a shocking turn when Niagara Regional Police arrested Dunya and charged her with second-degree murder. Investigators had conducted tests using a 12-pound baby doll to simulate the incident and claimed their findings cast doubt on Dunya's version of events. If convicted, she faced a potential life sentence. The case garnered widespread attention, with the courtroom becoming the center of opposing arguments about what truly happened that day. Dunya's defense, led by attorney Edward Greenspan, painted her as a loving mother devoted to her children. Friends testified about her constant care for Hesham and her frequent worries about his health, concerns so intense that her doctor had prescribed medication to help her manage her anxiety. After reviewing the evidence, Judge Donald Wallace noted that no one had actually seen exactly what occurred in the moments before Hesham's fall. He criticized the police simulation tests as inadequate and unreliable. With insufficient evidence to prove Dunya had acted deliberately, the judge dismissed the charge. Though legally exonerated, Dunya left the courthouse a changed woman. In tears, she expressed mixed feelings of relief and sorrow, acknowledging that what she had lost could never return. The tragedy of Hesham Sayegh, a life barely begun before being claimed by Niagara's powerful waters, remains one of the most haunting stories in the fall's long history. It was June 5th, 1990, a warm day in Niagara Falls, New York. The park was bustling with visitors, enjoying the view of the roaring waters, unaware of the impending spectacle. Jesse Sharp, a 28-year-old kayaker from Tennessee, had come for more than just sightseeing. His goal was set. He would be the first person to kayak over Niagara Falls. It was a stunt that park authorities strictly prohibited, but for Jesse, there was no turning back. With a reputation built on conquering some of North America's most dangerous rapids, Jesse was no stranger to risky maneuvers. His confidence in his skills was unmatched. He'd navigated wild currents and survived treacherous drops before, but nothing like this. The 12-foot fiberglass canoe he chose was custom-made for speed, sleek and agile. No helmet, no life jacket, just a kayaker and his craft, prepared to defy the odds. Jesse believed in the power of his training. For him, the river was not a force of nature but something to be controlled. This wasn't just about the thrill. There was a dream behind it. Fame. He believed that successfully navigating the falls would launch him into a new realm of recognition, fame, movie deals, and professional stunt work. His name would be remembered, carved into history. Jesse spent months preparing for what he thought would be his defining moment. At around 1:45 p.m., Jesse launched his canoe into the Niagara River upstream, making his way toward the falls. The roar of the water grew louder as he approached, the mist rising like a wall ahead of him. His paddle strokes were steady and purposeful, each one bringing him closer to the edge. Onlookers stood in stunned silence as he neared the brink. Witnesses later recalled seeing him raise his paddle high above his head, a final gesture of confidence, before the kayak tipped over the edge and disappeared into the roaring water below. For a moment, it seemed as though the world had paused. The crowd waited, expecting him to surface and paddle to shore, but the minutes stretched on, and there was no sign of him. Rescuers quickly began searching the lower river, but despite their efforts, Jesse was never seen again. An hour later, his canoe was found, battered and tossed several hundred yards downstream, but Jesse Sharp was gone. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened. Some view Jesse's attempt as an act of reckless ambition, others as a bold pursuit of immortality. Whatever it was, it ended in tragedy, a daring attempt to conquer one of nature's most powerful forces. But in the end, the river claimed its own. It was October 28, 2024, at Niagara Falls. The autumn air was crisp as darkness settled over the thundering waters. At approximately 9 p.m., 33-year-old Chianti Means stood on Luna Island with her two children, 9-year-old Roman Rossman and 5-month-old baby Mecca Means. What began as an ordinary evening would soon become one of the most heartbreaking tragedies in Niagara's recent history. Chianti, a resident of Niagara Falls, New York, was known in her community as a domestic violence counselor. According to her LinkedIn profile, she had graduated from a school in nearby Buffalo and dedicated her career to helping others escape dangerous situations. Friends described her as a loving mother who adored her children, particularly baby Mecca, who had been born just 5 months earlier. But beneath her caring exterior, Chianti was fighting silent battles. Her cousin, Biera Hamilton, would later reveal that Chianti had been suffering from postpartum depression, a condition that affects approximately 15% of new mothers. Understand this. Postpartum depression is very real and needs a cure, Hamilton told reporters. My cousin was silently fighting depression alone. In the weeks before that fateful night, Chianti had posted troubling messages on social media under the name Diamond Scott. I wish someone would love me because the man that's supposed to does not, read one post. Another stated, everyone please leave me alone. I'm in love with my daughter's father. I want my family back. Facebook posts indicated that Chianti and Mecca's father had ended their relationship in late August, adding to her emotional distress. That night on Luna Island, a small piece of land situated between the American Falls and Bridal Veil Falls, Chianti made a devastating decision. Surveillance footage later reviewed by investigators showed her approaching the safety guardrail, which stood approximately 3 feet high. In her arms, she carried baby Mecca, while Roman walked beside her. In one fluid motion, Chianti climbed over the protective barrier with both children. Within seconds, all three were swept into the powerful current. The Niagara River, which flows at a rate of 750,000 gallons per second, carried them toward the edge of the falls. Moments later, they plunged over the 167-foot drop into the churning waters below. New York State Park Police responded immediately to reports from horrified witnesses. Search and rescue teams were deployed, including the New York Marine Patrol, aviation, and underwater recovery units. State police also utilized unmanned aircraft systems to scan the turbulent waters, but the powerful currents made recovery nearly impossible. The investigation has determined that this incident was intentional in nature, though the circumstances remain under investigation, state troopers announced in a press release. Despite extensive search efforts, the bodies of Chianti and her children were never recovered, likely swept far downstream by the relentless current. Friends and family were left devastated by the tragedy. "I have been speechless and crying and couldn't sleep at all," wrote friend Kayshana Morgan on Facebook. "My heart is broken. Mental health is no joke." Another friend, Mish Molina, shared, "I am literally sick to my stomach and I can't even deal with the emotions I am feeling. Just know her and her children are dearly loved by me and my children." Chianti's cousin remembered her as someone with a beautiful soul who loved her children and her family very much. She added, "She was so full of life and wisdom. She and her kids will be missed so much." The deaths of Chianti, Roman, and Mecca joined the estimated 5,000 fatalities that have occurred at Niagara Falls since records began in the 1850s. Their story serves as a heartbreaking reminder of the hidden struggles many face and the devastating consequences when mental health crises go unaddressed. It was October 1st, 1995 at Niagara Falls. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as thousands of tourists gathered to witness the breathtaking power of Horseshoe Falls. Among them stood Robert Overacker, a 39-year-old stuntman from Camarillo, California, preparing for what he believed would be his greatest achievement. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. For 7 years, Robert had meticulously planned this stunt, riding a jet ski over Niagara Falls while deploying a rocket-propelled parachute. His mission wasn't just about thrill-seeking. His jet ski proudly displayed a sign reading, "Save the Homeless," symbolizing his desire to raise awareness for a cause close to his heart. At 12:35 p.m., Robert entered the Niagara River near the Canadian Niagara Power Plant. Dressed in a wetsuit and equipped with his specially designed parachute pack, he powered up his jet ski and began navigating toward the roaring falls. His stepbrother and a close friend stood among the spectators, cameras ready to document what they hoped would be a triumphant moment. As Robert approached the edge of Horseshoe Falls, he appeared remarkably calm and focused. Onlookers watched in awe as he skillfully maneuvered through the turbulent waters. When he reached the brink, he executed his plan, leaping off the jet ski and activating the rocket meant to deploy his parachute. For a brief, hopeful moment, it seemed to work. Then disaster struck. A critical error became apparent. The parachute had detached from Robert's body instead of opening properly. Rather than floating safely down, he plummeted 180 feet into the churning waters below. The crowd's excitement transformed into horror as they realized something had gone terribly wrong. At the base of the falls, chaos erupted. The Maid of the Mist tour boat was nearby and its crew responded immediately. Some spectators initially believed Robert might have survived, mistaking the violent motion of the rapids for swimming. This was tragically not the case. The crew recovered Robert's body and brought him to shore. Despite desperate efforts to save him, he was pronounced dead an hour later at Greater Niagara General Hospital. The injuries he sustained from the massive impact made survival impossible. In the aftermath, investigators discovered a devastating oversight. Robert had not packed the parachute himself. For a stunt prepared over 7 years, this single mistake proved fatal. His wife, Lori Overacker, was left to grieve her husband's untimely death. The couple had no children. Robert became the 15th person since 1901 to intentionally go over Niagara Falls with a device, and the 5th to die in such an attempt. His death sparked renewed debates about the dangers of such stunts, leading authorities on both sides of the falls to implement heavy fines, up to $10,000 in Canada and $25,000 in the United States, to discourage similar attempts. Tom Dettenbeck, a Parks Police dispatcher, later explained the deadly physics of such falls. When you're hitting water, it's like hitting cement at that height. You're talking 1 million gallons of water going over the falls in a second. That's a lot of force, a lot of power. What makes Robert's story particularly haunting is that he had twice before traveled to the falls with the intention of performing this stunt. Both times friends had managed to dissuade him. This third visit proved different, his determination unwavering despite the risks. German tourist Manfred Baldus accidentally captured the entire incident on video. The footage shows Robert's final moments, raising his hands triumphantly in the air as he went over the edge, unaware of the fatal malfunction about to occur. Clay Schmidt, who later posted the video online, wrote that Robert went out in the best way possible, fists in the air. Witnesses who were present that day still recall the horrifying scene. One tourist who watched from a hotel balcony later commented, "I turned to my friends after watching this and muttered something about never drinking again because I just watched a guy go over the falls on a jet ski." Robert Overacker's story remains a sobering reminder of Niagara's raw, unforgiving power, a force of nature that continues to inspire awe, respect, and sometimes tragic miscalculation. His name is now forever linked to the falls he sought to conquer, a testament to both human daring and nature's dominance. It was August 14, 2011, at Niagara Falls. The summer air was filled with excitement as tourists from around the world gathered to witness the breathtaking natural wonder. Among them was Ayano Tokumasu, a 20-year-old Japanese student who had been studying English at Toronto's Hansa Language Center for just 2 weeks. Bright, bubbly, and adventurous, Ayano had traveled to the falls with classmates for what should have been a memorable weekend excursion. As evening approached, around 8:30 p.m., Ayano stood near the edge of Horseshoe Falls on the Canadian side. Like countless visitors before her, she wanted the perfect photograph to capture her experience at this world-famous landmark. But what happened next would transform a moment of joy into an unimaginable tragedy. Surveillance footage from a nearby visitors center later revealed the sequence of events. Ayano, dressed in a distinctive red sweater and holding an umbrella, had climbed over the protective stone railing that separates tourists from the dangerous waters. She straddled the barrier, one leg on either side, while gazing down at the rushing waters below. It appeared she was posing for a photo that her friend was taking. What Ayano didn't realize was the deadly risk she was taking. The stone barrier stood just 24 meters upstream from the brink of Horseshoe Falls, where the Niagara River plunges 167 feet into the churning basin below. The current at this point moves with tremendous force, enough to sweep away anything in its path within seconds. As Ayano attempted to climb back over the railing, the unthinkable happened. She lost her balance and slipped, falling into the powerful current. Witnesses described the horrifying moment. Ayano's brief struggle against the rushing waters before being swept toward the falls. Within moments, she disappeared over the edge, plummeting into the violent turbulence below. Nearby tourists screamed in shock. Park staff were alerted immediately, and emergency responders rushed to the scene. Niagara Parks police and emergency workers launched a desperate search, combing the waters with helicopters and boats, but the powerful currents and dangerous conditions made recovery nearly impossible. For 4 agonizing days, the search continued. Then, on August 18th, an employee at Cave of the Winds, a park attraction on the American side of the falls, spotted a body floating in the lower Niagara River. Authorities confirmed it was Ayano. In a haunting twist, a vacationing couple from Windsor, Ontario, Andrea Smith and Jason Watson, later discovered they had inadvertently captured Ayano's final moments in a photograph they took that day. In their tourist snapshot, a figure in a red sweater can be seen in the background standing on the railing. "It actually gave me a chill," Smith told the Windsor Star. "We could have done something to save her and we didn't." Ayano's death sent shockwaves through her language school in Toronto. Classmates described her as always smiling and very happy. They created a memorial book with messages like, "We are praying for you, Ayano, and we will remember you forever." Her Facebook page revealed a vibrant young woman with a passion for adventure. Photos showed her riding camels and climbing trees in Toronto. Now these images serve as poignant reminders of a life cut tragically short. Niagara Park's police chief Doug Kane emphasized the rarity of such incidents, noting, "We get about 11 million people a year here who view that annually. This is the first occurrence of this nature that I can recall." Ayano Tokumasu became one of approximately 5,000 people who have fallen into Niagara Falls since 1850. Her story serves as a heartbreaking reminder of nature's power and the dangers that can hide behind even the most beautiful vistas. It was a crisp July morning in 1920 when Charles Stevens, a 58-year-old barber from Bristol, England, stood at the edge of the Niagara River, preparing to attempt what many would call madness. The roar of Niagara Falls echoed in the background, a constant reminder of the immense power he was about to challenge. For Charles, this was no ordinary stunt. It was a chance for glory, fame, and an escape from the ordinary. He was leaving behind his life in England, drawn by the promise of adventure, where the fall of water from a 167-foot drop could make someone immortal or take their life. Charles had long been captivated by the stories of thrill seekers who dared to conquer the falls in a barrel. It was an almost absurd stunt, but it had become a popular challenge. To descend over the falls in a specially designed barrel and survive. Those who succeeded were celebrated, and those who failed were often quickly forgotten. For Charles, the idea of barrel stunting was simple: survive, and the fame would follow. His custom-made barrel was large and sturdy, built from oak and reinforced with steel hoops. At the bottom, a 100-pound anvil rested, designed to act as ballast, ensuring the barrel would stay upright as it fell. Just as the ballast of a ship keeps it steady in rough seas, this weight would help stabilize the barrel's fall. Charles carefully climbed inside, feeling the cold wood and steel around him. The barrel closed, sealing him in with only the deafening sound of the falls growing louder, and the sharp scent of the river filling his senses. With one final glance at the crowd on the riverbank, his assistants pushed the barrel into the water. The current took hold instantly, spinning and tossing the barrel, rocking it back and forth. Each wave jolted it upward, only to slam it down again. The water churned violently, and Charles could feel the power of the river trying to shake him free. As the barrel was carried toward the edge of the falls, the sense of inevitability grew. There was no turning back now. The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on the barrel as it neared the precipice. For a moment it seemed to hesitate, teetering on the edge, suspended between life and death. Then with one final tilt it disappeared into the mist below, swallowed by the deafening roar of the falls. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The crowd scanned the water below, waiting for any sign of life. Then, through the mist and foam, pieces of the barrel began to surface, drifting with the current. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Maybe Charles had survived, but as the debris was pulled closer, the sight of a right arm still strapped inside the wreckage dashed any hope. The anvil, meant to stabilize the barrel, had caused its undoing. The extra weight was too much, and when the barrel struck the jagged rocks at the base of the falls, the force of the impact shattered it. Charles Stevens had been killed instantly. The boldness of his attempt had met the unforgiving power of nature. Charles Stevens' tragic end serves as a stark reminder of the dangers in testing nature's limits. Driven by a quest for fame, he faced the falls, only for the very force he sought to conquer to claim his life. His story endures as a somber reminder of nature's uncontrollable power.